We cannot delay any longer. The time has come.
But what if they catch us? It is too great a risk.
We have no choice.
LAIRD INTERVINO. The highland winds swept over the jagged cliffs, carrying whispers of old magic through the heather and pine. In the great hall of Clan Dunvegan, torches flickered against stone walls carved with the stories of ancestors long gone. The hall was filled with laughter, chatter, and the heavy scent of roasted meat and burning pine. But amid the celebration, a storm waited, unseen yet inevitable. Aelith, daughter of a lesser branch of the clan, entered the hall with her head held high. She had always been proud, sharp of mind, and brave in heart, yet she had never belonged fully to this world of lairds, warriors, and honor-bound tradition. Tonight, the hall seemed larger, colder, and full of eyes that measured her worth. She had been summoned to the gathering to witness an annual ritual of tribute, a ceremony where younger members proved their loyalty and respect to the clan elders. Normally, such gatherings were a matter of pride, but tonight, the whispers began almost as soon as she stepped inside. "You dare show your face after what you've done," hissed one elder from the shadowed side of the hall. "Perhaps she thinks herself braver than her station," another muttered, barely louder than the crackle of fire. Aelith's stomach tightened. She knew what they were talking about, a minor mistake, an innocent misstep that had been magnified into a scandal. Yet the hall's walls seemed to stretch with every mocking gaze, turning her humiliation into a living weight. She moved toward her seat, trying to ignore the laughter and the cruel smiles that followed her. She heard her name whispered, twisted into jest. Her cheeks burned, her pride stung more than her body could. And then the cruelest moment arrived. The eldest of the clan, a man with a voice that could command storms, pointed at her. "Aelith," he thundered, "you have dishonored yourself and our lineage. Stand so that all may see your shame." All laughter ceased as Aelith's pulse thundered in her ears. The hall seemed to shrink, torchlight dancing across the faces of her family and neighbors. She stood, trembling but defiant, her green eyes blazing despite the fear coiling inside her chest. The elders recited her mistakes with cold precision, twisting minor errors into crimes against tradition. Every word landed like a hammer, shaping her humiliation into something nearly tangible. The younger members whispered behind their hands, some stifling giggles, others glancing away in sympathy. But no one spoke for her. Aelith clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. She had always believed that strength came from action, from courage, from standing tall even when the world sought to break her. But this felt different. This felt like the world itself had conspired against her, every stone and every torch conspiring to make her small. Then he appeared. From the far end of the hall, a figure stepped from the shadows, tall and imposing. Eamon, the laird of the neighboring stronghold, known across clans for his stern temper and mysterious nature, observed quietly. Rumors said he was bound by an ancient curse, one that made him untouchable and feared. Yet the way his dark eyes watched Aelith was not with scorn or judgment. It was with something else, something sharp and piercing, as if he saw not the shame cast upon her but the fire she tried desperately to hide. Aelith felt her breath catch, though she could not have said why. His presence was both a comfort and a warning. She had heard tales of him, his cruelty in war, his coldness toward traitors, but there was something more in his gaze. Something that promised danger, yes, but also something that whispered of strength, of protection, of a power she could not yet name. The ritual continued, and Aelith's heart sank with each word of condemnation. She bowed her head in respect, though every fiber of her being screamed against it. The shame pressed down like a physical weight, and she wished, with every beat of her heart, that she could vanish into the walls, into the forest, anywhere that would shield her from the eyes of the clan. Finally, when the words had been spoken and the laughter began anew, she could no longer hold herself upright. She turned, her skirts rustling against the stone floor, and fled from the hall, her bare feet slipping slightly on the cold stones. Outside, the wind hit her like a storm, cutting through the remnants of fear and anger. She ran, not toward a place, but away from them all, seeking the solace of the forest that bordered the highlands. The trees loomed tall and silent as she entered the edge of the ancient woods, their branches like dark arms, offering her refuge. Aelith pressed her back against the rough bark of an old oak, her chest heaving. Tears streaked her cheeks and she let herself collapse to the damp earth. She was tired of shame, tired of being measured and found wanting. She was tired of being small. It was there in the quiet, broken only by the whispering of the wind, that she sensed it, something watching her. Not the judgmental eyes of the clan, but something older, older than stone, older than the mountains themselves. The shadows seemed to twist in her peripheral vision, moving with intent, yet never touching her. The forest breathed around her, alive with the hum of magic that lingered like a heartbeat beneath the soil. And then, from the darkness, a hand appeared. Aelith flinched, expecting a threat. Instead, a deep voice, smooth and commanding, spoke her name. "You have not yet fallen," it said, not as a question, but as an observation. Aelith turned sharply, and there he was, Eamon, the laird, standing as if he had stepped out from the very shadows themselves. His cloak billowed with the wind, and his dark eyes shone with something she could not name. Not anger, not pity, but recognition. "I do not understand why you follow me," she said, her voice shaking, though not with fear alone. "I am no one, I am disgraced. I am—" "You are not as small as they think," he interrupted, his voice calm but commanding. "You have fire in your blood, you will need it. And soon." Aelith blinked, uncertain. She wanted to run, to hide, to push him away. But something in his presence rooted her to the spot, as though he were both a warning and a lifeline. He did not step closer, but he did not leave either. The wind carried his words, sharp as the edge of a blade, through the dark forest. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Only to see if you will rise," he said, turning slightly so that the moonlight caught the edge of his face. Shadows danced across his features, hiding as much as they revealed. "Tonight you stand in shame. Tomorrow you may stand in power, but the choice is yours." Aelith wanted to ask more, to demand explanations, but her lips would not obey. She had never met anyone like him, someone who saw her not for the mistakes that crushed her, but for the strength she barely recognized herself. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. The night air hummed with a promise she could almost taste. She wanted to trust him, yet a part of her whispered that doing so would be dangerous. Still, the longing for escape, for redemption, for honor outweighed her fear. I don't know if I can," she admitted softly. "You will," he said simply, "or you will die trying. And if you do die, it will not be in shame. You will have fought, and that alone makes you worthy." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and the distant roar of the highlands. Aelith shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of what she faced. She looked up at him, eyes wide, heart pounding. "Will you help me?" she asked. Eamon's gaze held hers, unflinching, unreadable. Then, without a word, he extended his hand. No command, no demand. Just the hand of someone who saw the spark within her and offered it a chance to grow. Aelith hesitated. The cold night air bit at her skin. The forest around them seemed endless. Yet something in her soul stirred, a defiance that would not die. Slowly trembling, she placed her hand in his. The moment their hands touched, a chill ran up her arm, and the shadows seemed to shift with a life of their own. The forest whispered louder, as if acknowledging the pact, the choice, the bond being formed. And then, as she drew in a shaky breath, the wind carried a sound that froze her blood, a distant cry, sharp and urgent, coming from the direction of the hall. Aelith's eyes widened. She realized with horror that the night was far from over. Whatever awaited her back in the clan, she would face it, but now she would not be alone. She looked up at Eamon. His expression was unreadable, but in his dark eyes she saw a promise, danger, yes, but also a chance at something more than shame, a chance at power. a chance at honor, a chance at herself. And with that, they stepped deeper into the shadows of the forest, toward a destiny neither of them fully understood, but one that would change both their lives forever. Cliffhanger. In the distance, a shadowy figure watched them from the edge of the trees. Its eyes glowed faintly, unnatural and sharp. Whatever it was, it had been waiting, and it now stirred, sensing that the fire it sought had awakened. The forest was quiet, but it was not empty. Mist curled among the roots and twisted around the trunks like ghostly fingers. Eamon led Aelith deeper into the trees, his steps silent on the damp earth. Each movement seemed measured, purposeful, as if the forest itself obeyed him. Aelith struggled to keep pace, her heart still hammering from the humiliation she had endured in the hall. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small yet steady. "To my stronghold," Eamon replied without turning. "It is a place of stone and shadow, far from the judgments of those who cannot see." Aelith glanced up at him, noting the stoic strength in his posture. Every inch of him seemed carved from the same stone as the cliffs he ruled, unyielding, silent, and unbreakable. She wanted to ask him why he had chosen to intervene in her shame, why he had followed her into the forest, but something about the way he moved, silent and purposeful, made her hesitate. The path twisted upward, narrow and steep, carved long ago by hands no longer remembered. The fog thickened, swallowing the light of the moon, and Aelith felt a shiver run down her spine. She realized with a twinge of awe that the forest around her was not ordinary. She could feel it, subtle and electric, as if the trees themselves watched and listened. Finally, they reached the stronghold, a fortress carved into the cliffside, its towers reaching like jagged teeth into the night sky. Torches flickered along the walls, casting moving shadows that danced like spirits. Eamon pushed open a massive door, and they stepped into a hall lined with banners of old victories and ancestral symbols. "This is magnificent," Aelith breathed, her voice barely more than a whisper. She had never seen such a place, a fortress that seemed alive with history and power. "Magnificent, yes," Eamon said, "but only because it has endured. Its walls have seen war, betrayal, and loss. You will learn that power is not given, it is claimed, and often at great cost." Aelith swallowed, her throat dry. She had felt powerless for so long, a pawn in the judgments of others, that the very notion of claiming power made her pulse quicken. Yet fear coiled in her chest. She did not know if she could trust him or herself. Eamon led her to a smaller chamber, dimly lit, with maps and ancient texts spread across a long table. "You have been humiliated tonight," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But humiliation is not the end. You have a choice. You can remain a shadow of others' expectations, or you can rise." "I don't even know how," Aelith admitted. "I've never done anything like this before." "Then you will learn," he said simply. "I will teach you, but you must be willing to endure pain, struggle, and fear. Only then will you understand your own strength." For hours, they spoke quietly, and for the first time since the ceremony, Aelith felt the tight coil of shame loosen slightly. Eamon did not speak of judgment or blame. He spoke of skill, of honor, and of the ancient power that lay hidden in her bloodline. He told her that her family had been cursed long ago, a subtle enchantment meant to weaken their courage and pride. Her public humiliation had been a symptom, not the cause, and it had been orchestrated by those who feared the strength she carried. Aelith listened, incredulous and fascinated. Her anger against the clan's elders, which had been raw and bitter, now mingled with a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was not the end, after all. Perhaps she could claim what was hers. "You speak of magic," she said finally, her voice low. "Of power in my blood, but I have never felt anything like that." "Yet it is there," Eamon said, waiting for guidance. "Tonight we begin." Over the next days, Eamon trained her with a discipline that was both physical and mental. She learned to move silently, to observe without being seen, and to trust instincts she had never known she possessed. They practiced with swords, but also with words and strategies, games of wit and patience that sharpened her mind as well as her body. Aelith's respect for Eamon grew, though it was tempered with caution. He was strict, unyielding, and at times frighteningly distant. Yet she also saw glimpses of something more, small acts of care, a protective glance, a voice that softened when he thought she was not looking. One night, as they practiced in the forest near the stronghold, a sudden movement caught their attention. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the trees. Eamon's hand went instinctively to the hilt of his sword, and Aelith froze, her heart racing. "Stay calm," he whispered, his voice a steady anchor. "Observe. Do not act until you understand the threat." Aelith obeyed, her training kicking in. She realized that what had followed them was not ordinary, its presence was deliberate, intelligent. She sensed its focus on her, as if it recognized something deep within her, something the clan had overlooked. Eamon's eyes narrowed. "A test," he said. "Not from me, but from forces older than the clans themselves. They will challenge you, and they will try to break you." "Break me?" Aelith echoed, her pulse quickening. "Not entirely," he said, "but they will attempt it, and the stronger you grow, the more dangerous their tests will become." Aelith looked up at him, her voice soft. "Why are you helping me?" Eamon's gaze was distant, thoughtful. "Because you have fire, because you are not meant to be small, and because the world often ignores what it fears to see." For the first time, Aelith felt a glimmer of trust. She wanted to believe him, though a part of her feared that the fire he spoke of might also burn her if she was not careful. Over the next week, they grew closer in quiet ways. Shared glances, small touches during training, and the silent understanding that each was testing and learning from the other. Eamon never forced trust, but he offered it in moments of calm, and Aelith responded in kind, slowly letting down the walls she had built around her heart. Yet, as their bond deepened, danger loomed. A rival clan, long jealous of Eamon's strength, had learned of Aelith's presence and the power she was beginning to wield. One evening, as they patrolled the forest under the cloak of night, a group of masked figures emerged from the fog, swords drawn, eyes glinting in the torchlight. "Ambush," Aelith whispered, adrenaline flooding her veins. Eamon moved like a shadow, fluid and deadly, blocking the first blow aimed at her. She tried to follow his movements, remembering the lessons he had taught her, yet fear threatened to paralyze her. "You must trust yourself," Eamon called, deflecting a blade. "Remember your strength." Aelith drew her own sword, clumsy but determined. She felt a thrill, a pulse of energy, and a spark of something ancient deep within her bloodline. With Eamon at her side, she faced the attackers, her mind clear, her movements instinctive. The fight was brief but intense. Eamon's skill was unmatched, yet he was not invincible. One of the rival warriors lunged unexpectedly, and Eamon was struck in the shoulder, pain flashing across his face. Aelith froze, fear surging. She wanted to retreat, to flee, but then she remembered his words, the fire in her blood. She acted, stepping forward, her sword finding its mark, forcing the attacker back. The others hesitated, shocked by her courage. Eamon recovered, blocking another strike, and together they drove the ambushers into retreat. Breathing heavily, Aelith turned to him. You were hurt." Eamon smiled faintly, though pain was evident. "It is nothing. You did well, better than you know." Aelith's chest heaved, not from exhaustion alone, but from a strange mix of fear, admiration, and a dawning realization. She was no longer the powerless girl humiliated in the clan hall. She had strength. She had courage. And for the first time she felt that she could rise as he had promised. Eamon studied her quietly, his dark eyes holding a mixture of pride and something deeper, something Aelith could not yet name. "Tonight you have faced danger," he said softly. "But the world has only begun to test you, and there are truths you must know about the curse, about your lineage, and about the destiny that awaits you. Are you ready to hear them?" Aelith hesitated. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and distant fire. She felt the pull of fear and the tug of destiny. "Yes," she said finally, her voice firm. "I am ready." Eamon's gaze softened for the briefest moment, then hardened with resolve. "Then you must listen carefully. Your shame was never yours alone. It is part of a curse, older than the clans, designed to weaken your family line. And the moment you reclaim your strength, the forces that cursed you will notice and they will come." Aelith's heart pounded. She had survived humiliation, training, and ambush, but now she understood that greater challenges lay ahead. She was no longer simply a girl in the forest. She was a spark, and the fire that had been sleeping within her was awakening. Cliffhanger, from the shadows beyond the clearing, unseen eyes glimmered with anticipation. The curse that had haunted her family stirred, sensing the fire within her. Somewhere a figure moved silently, watching, waiting for the moment to strike, and it would come soon. The dawn broke over the highlands like molten gold spilling across jagged cliffs. Mist clung stubbornly to the valleys, hiding the secrets of the forests below. Aelith stood on the balcony of Eamon's fortress, gazing down at the endless green that stretched toward the horizon. Her body was sore, muscles aching from the grueling training of the past weeks, yet her spirit felt alive in ways she had never imagined. Eamon joined her silently, his dark cloak brushing the stone floor. He said nothing at first, merely observing the sunrise with an intensity that seemed almost sacred. "You are changing," he said finally, his voice low, almost reverent. "The fire in you grows stronger every day." Aelith turned to him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "And if the fire consumes me," she asked, "what if I am not ready for it?" Eamon's gaze softened for a moment. "You will never be ready," he said, "not fully, but readiness is not required. Courage is." She frowned. Courage had always seemed like a simple word, one that she could never truly claim. But now, standing beside Eamon, she felt the stirrings of it inside her, a pulse of strength, sharp and fierce, waiting to be called forth. The morning passed with training. Aelith practiced her swordplay, her movements sharper and more precise than ever. Eamon observed her, correcting her stance, teaching her not only how to strike but how to anticipate, how to move like the wind and flow like water. Every correction was gentle yet firm, and each touch, each glance, carried a tension that made her pulse quicken in ways she did not fully understand. By afternoon, they retreated to the inner chamber of the fortress, a room lined with books, scrolls, and artifacts older than any living clan member. Here, Eamon revealed fragments of his own history. His voice, steady but carrying a weight of sorrow, told of lost family, of betrayal by those he had trusted, and of the curse that haunted his line, much like the one touching Aelith's bloodline. "You see," he said, spreading his hand over an ancient map, "our fates are not simple. You think your shame was your own. It was never just that. It is connected to forces older than this castle, older than the clans. Forces that hunger for weakness, for fear." Aelith listened, her fingers curling into the edges of the table. The words were heavy, almost too heavy to bear, yet she felt a strange clarity. She was not alone. And if she could learn to control the fire inside her, she might finally stand against the curse that had haunted her family for generations. That night, they ventured into the forest again, this time for a purpose beyond training. Eamon led her to a hidden glade where the moonlight filtered through the trees like silver rain. Here, he began to teach her the secrets of perception and strategy, lessons not just of strength but of awareness, patience, and subtlety. "Power is not always in the sword," he said. "It is in knowing when to act, when to wait, when to turn your weakness into strength. Your enemies will watch you closely, looking for fear. Do not give it to them." Aelith nodded, absorbing each word. She began to sense the forest differently now, the rustle of leaves, the movement of shadows, the faint stirrings of creatures that seemed older than the hills themselves. Magic, subtle but persistent, hummed beneath her skin, waiting to be understood. But even as she learned, the world beyond their sanctuary was not idle. The rival clan, still bitter and jealous of Eamon's reputation, had not forgotten her. They had spies in the hills, and whispers of her growing strength reached ears that sought only to destroy her. Days passed, each one blending into the next, filled with training, study, and moments of quiet understanding between Aelith and Eamon. The bond between them deepened, though neither spoke of it openly. A glance lingered too long, a hand brushed against another's in passing, and in the silence that followed, unspoken emotions grew like embers in the dark. Then came the night when the true test arrived. Aelith had been practicing a ritual Eamon had taught her, one that focused the mind and awakened latent energy within her bloodline. She knelt in the glade, the silver light of the moon illuminating her face, her hands tracing ancient symbols in the air. The forest held its breath. Suddenly the air shifted. A sound, faint but deliberate, reached her ears, a footstep too light to belong to any ordinary creature. Her heart jumped. She sensed movement in the shadows beyond the clearing. Eamon was not near, she was alone. "Focus," she whispered to herself, drawing on the lessons he had taught her. The symbols glowed faintly as she directed her energy outward, feeling the pulse of the forest respond. From the darkness emerged a figure, cloaked in black, eyes glowing faintly like embers. Aelith's breath caught. She recognized it immediately. It was not human, not entirely, but something older, something tied to the curse that had haunted her lineage for centuries. The figure advanced, slow and deliberate, testing her, circling her like a predator. Fear clawed at her chest, but she remembered Eamon's words. Courage. She would not show weakness. Drawing a deep breath, she stepped forward, the energy within her flaring brightly. The figure paused, recoiling slightly, as though surprised by her power. Aelith felt a thrill of fear and exhilaration at once. She was confronting the curse itself, manifesting in shadow, and she had not fled. From the trees, a familiar voice called, sharp and commanding. "Aelith, remember your training." Eamon emerged from the shadows, his sword drawn, eyes blazing with intensity. The figure turned toward him, its attention momentarily divided. Aelith seized the opportunity. Channeling her newfound energy, she projected a shield of light, a barrier that shimmered and pulsed, forcing the shadow backward. The battle was brief but tense. Eamon fought with precision, driving the figure back, while Aelith concentrated, holding her ground. Slowly they forced it to retreat into the deeper forest, disappearing like smoke into the night. Breathing heavily, Aelith looked at Eamon. I did it," she asked, awe and disbelief in her voice. Eamon sheathed his sword, his gaze unreadable but proud. "You did. You faced what many would flee from, and you survived. Not just physically, but with your courage intact. That is no small victory." Aelith's heart swelled. For the first time, she felt a sense of accomplishment that was not tied to the approval of others. She had faced fear, darkness, and uncertainty, and had prevailed. But even in victory, there was warning. Eamon's eyes darkened as he studied the forest. "The curse has noticed your strength," he said quietly. "Tonight's encounter was a test, a signal. There will be others, and they will not be so easily driven away." Aelith shivered, the thrill of triumph mingling with a new sense of peril. The shadow in the forest had been only a herald. The true danger was yet to come. In the following days, they prepared for the inevitable confrontation with the rival clan. Aelith's skills grew sharper, her mind keener, and her body more attuned to both combat and subtle magic. Eamon continued to guide her, teaching not only techniques of battle but lessons of strategy, foresight, and trust. And yet, amid the training, Aelith could not ignore the quiet pull of her heart. Each glance from Eamon carried weight, each brush of his hand left her pulse racing. She struggled to understand her feelings: fear, admiration, respect, and something deeper, something dangerous yet irresistible. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains and painted the sky in streaks of red and gold, Aelith stood alone on the balcony of the fortress. She thought of the clan, of the curse, and of the figure that had appeared in the forest. She understood now that her journey was only beginning. She would face humiliation, danger, and darkness, but she would not do so alone. Eamon joined her silently, his presence steady, comforting, yet charged with a tension she could not name. "The world will test you," he said. "It always does, but you are no longer a victim. You are a force, and forces like ours, they are never ignored." Aelith turned to him, searching his face for answers, for reassurance, for something she could hold onto. But all she found was the quiet certainty in his eyes. A promise, a challenge, a warning. And then from the distant hills a sound reached them, soft at first, almost imperceptible, then growing clearer. The echo of drums, faint but deliberate, carrying over the valley like a herald of war. The rival clan was moving. They had gathered their strength, and they knew Aelith was no longer defenseless. Her pulse quickened. The shadow she had faced in the forest was not gone. It had merely withdrawn, waiting, observing. And now, the world outside their sanctuary was preparing to strike. Eamon's gaze met hers, steady and commanding. "Are you ready?" he asked. Aelith squared her shoulders, drawing a deep breath. "I am," she said, her voice strong, though her heart raced with fear and anticipation. "Good," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Then let them come. We will show them that fire cannot be extinguished." The wind swept through the fortress, carrying the scent of rain, pine, and distant danger. Somewhere in the shadows, the curse stirred again, sensing the awakening of its long-targeted prey. The night was alive with anticipation, and Aelith felt, deep in her bones, that the trials to come would shape her in ways she could not yet imagine. Cliffhanger. From the hills beyond the fortress, the rival clan gathered in silence, their banners fluttering in the wind. Among them, a cloaked figure stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly, whispering a single word that carried across the valley. "She cannot escape what is hers." The first light of dawn broke over the highlands, painting the cliffs and valleys in hues of gold and crimson. Mist swirled around the fortress like restless spirits, hiding the movements of those who came to challenge them. Aelith stood at the edge of the balcony, her heart steady but fierce, the weight of everything she had endured pressing upon her shoulders. Beside her, Eamon stood silently, his cloak brushing the stones, his gaze fixed on the distant hills where the rival clan had gathered. Their banners were black and red, fluttering in the wind like warnings. But Aelith no longer felt fear in the same way. She had trained, learned, and discovered a strength within herself that no humiliation, no curse, and no threat could take away. "Are you ready?" Eamon asked, his voice low, carrying both command and care. Aelith turned to him, her green eyes steady. "I am." We faced them together. Eamon's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "Good. Remember everything I have taught you, trust in yourself, and in what we have built." The fortress gates opened, and they descended into the courtyard where loyal warriors of Eamon's stronghold awaited, their faces grim but resolute. Each of them had heard whispers of Aelith's strength, and though many had doubted her before, now their eyes reflected respect and hope. Aelith's pulse quickened, but not with fear. With every step she felt the fire within her grow, steady and controlled, a fire she now wielded as her own. She remembered the shame of the hall, the whispers of the elders, and the shadow that had stalked her in the forest. None of it could touch her now. The rival clan advanced from the hills like a wave, their drums beating in the valley, calling forth echoes of war. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the distant smoke of torches. Eamon raised his hand, silent signals passing through the ranks. The battle was not only one of strength but of strategy. They had trained for this, anticipated this, and yet for Aelith it was more than a battle. It was the culmination of her journey, the reclaiming of her honor, the confrontation with the curse, and the proving of her own courage. The first clash was violent. Warriors met with the thunder of boots and the clang of steel. Aelith moved through the battlefield like a shadow, guided by instinct and training. Her sword struck with precision, her movements fluid and confident. She felt the energy of the forest, the lessons of Eamon, and the power within her bloodline flowing through her. From the edge of the fight, a familiar figure emerged, dark, cloaked, and unnatural. The shadow that had tested her in the forest now joined the fray, its presence chilling even seasoned warriors. But Aelith did not flinch. She remembered the ritual, the training, and the lessons Eamon had imparted. With a deep breath, she raised her hand, channeling her energy outward. A brilliant wave of light shimmered and pulsed from her, forcing the shadow back. It hissed and recoiled, but it was not gone. The curse was strong, older than the clans, yet it could not withstand the strength of one who had embraced courage and fire. Eamon moved beside her, sword and shield ready. Together, they confronted the rival clan's forces. He was her anchor, but she was no longer a follower. She was a partner, a force equal to his, and the combination of their strength turned the tide. The battle was long and tense. Aelith fought not only for herself but for the honor stolen from her, for her family, and for the bonds she had forged. Each strike, each parry was infused with determination and skill. The rival clan faltered, unable to match the precision, strategy, and power of the pair. Finally, the shadow, the ancient curse manifested, hissed in fury and vanished into the forest. It had been tested and defeated for now. The rival clan, seeing their leader's failure, began to retreat, their banners lowering in acknowledgement of defeat. Aelith fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Eamon knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You have done well," he said softly. "You have faced what others feared, and you have not wavered. Your courage has shattered the chains that bound you." Tears blurred Aelith's vision, not from pain, but from relief, pride, and the quiet joy of triumph. She looked up at him, searching his face for something she could not yet name. "We did it," she whispered. Eamon's dark eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed a small, rare smile. "Yes, together." The sun climbed higher, casting light on the valley, illuminating the highlands in brilliance. The fortress walls, once merely stone, seemed to glow with the victory of the day. The curse had been challenged, the rival clan defeated, and Aelith's honor restored. But the victory was not only outward. Inside her, Aelith felt a transformation. The shame, the humiliation, and the fear that had once ruled her life had been replaced by confidence, courage, and a quiet power she could feel in every step, every breath. She had faced her destiny and claimed it. In the quiet aftermath, Eamon led her to the edge of the cliffs overlooking the highlands. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of pine, rain, and freedom. He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, yet not touching, not claiming, simply being. "You have grown," he said, his voice low, steady. "Stronger than I imagined, and not just in skill, in heart. You have faced fear, despair, and the darkness within yourself, and you have not been broken." Aelith turned to him, her heart pounding. "I could not have done it without you," she admitted. "You believed in me, even when I could not believe in myself." Eamon's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability flickering in his dark eyes. "Belief is not given lightly," he said. "I have seen many fall, but you are fire, and fire cannot be ignored." For a moment, silence passed between them. The wind carried their words across the cliffs, mixing with the cries of distant birds and the faint echoes of the retreating rival clan. Aelith felt a pull in her chest, a quiet longing that had grown through days of training, shared struggle, and the unspoken bond between them. "You will no longer be humiliated," Eamon said finally. "Not by them, not by tradition, not by the curse. You are stronger than all of it, and you have proven it." Aelith's eyes filled with tears, and she let them fall unashamed. For the first time, she felt truly free, not just from the clan's judgment, but from the fear that had haunted her heart for years. She had faced darkness, and she had emerged whole. The moment was interrupted by a distant movement in the forest. Aelith's senses, honed by days of training, caught it immediately. She turned ready, but Eamon's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "It is only the wind," he said, his voice calm. "For now. The curse watches, yes, but it has been challenged. You have changed the balance." Aelith nodded, understanding that the danger was not entirely gone. There would always be threats, shadows waiting in the corners of the world, but she was no longer afraid. She had the fire, the courage, and the wisdom to face them. Eamon's gaze held hers, steady and unyielding. "You have earned your place," he said softly. "Not as someone beneath the clan, not as someone humiliated, but as someone who stands equal to me, equal to the world." Aelith's breath caught. The words were more than honor. They were recognition, validation, and an unspoken promise. She felt the bond between them, not just of teacher and pupil, protector and protected, but something deeper: trust, respect, and perhaps, in time, something that could grow into love. The wind picked up, swirling around them, carrying the scent of highland pine and the distant sea. Aelith felt a calm determination settle over her. Whatever the future held, whether rival clans, lingering curses, or new challenges, she would face it not as a frightened girl, but as a woman who had reclaimed her power and her destiny. Eamon's hand moved slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, not possessively, but with care. Aelith met his gaze, and in the silent moment between them, she understood that some bonds were forged in fire, tested in shadow, and made unbreakable by courage. The fortress behind them stood as a symbol not just of strength, but of the trials they had endured together. And as the sun rose higher, illuminating the highlands in golden light, Aelith felt a quiet smile touch her lips. She was free. She was whole. And the fire within her would never be extinguished. Climactic cliffhanger. In the distance, beyond the hills, a faint shadow moved, silent, observing, waiting. The curse may have been challenged, the rival clan defeated, but the world was not finished with Aelith. Something ancient had noticed her awakening, and somewhere in the depths of the highlands, a new trial was stirring, waiting for the fire that refused to die.